So in the first half of this session, we talked about all of our next steps. Now we're going to talk about some tips to successful disciple making. This is in pages 14 and 15 of your servant leadership training booklet. Go ahead, turn there and follow along with me. So here's the first tip that I have, okay? When it comes to disciple making, you need to identify the right person. Identify the right person. Now, we have a couple of phrases that we use around here to recognize who the right person is. Fat. Is this person fat? Faithful, available, and trainable. As in, are they faithful to God? Are they available to me? And are they actually trainable? Are they actually going to change? Because if they're missing one of those qualities, then you're going to be wasting your time. Okay? Or clay, committed, looking, available, yielding. You can use one of these alliterations to actually figure out who it is that you should be investing in. Now, obviously, you shouldn't do that without prayer. You shouldn't do that without actually talking to God about if he has a person in mind, because chances are he can help you find the right person. But investing in the wrong person is an exercise in frustration. They can be faithful to God and they can be trainable, but if they're not available, your schedules are never going to line up. They can be available and trainable, but if they aren't faithful, then the Spirit's not actually going to be working in that person's life for transformation. Now, just because they aren't ready yet doesn't mean that they're never going to be ready for discipleship. When you look at someone and you say, is this the right person for me to disciple, to invest in, and you decide to put a pause on them, I encourage you, make that just a pause. At some point, come back and say, is this the right person for me to disciple now? Because who knows what God will do in their lives and around their lives. You're not the only person that's probably going to be discipling that person. So the next step or next tip is begin with an invite. Begin with an invite. It's this simple. I think a lot of discipleship doesn't happen because people just don't ask. But it all just starts with me saying, hey, would you be willing to meet me out for lunch and talk about what discipleship looks like in your life? Would you be willing to hang out and maybe figure out what spiritual growth would look like in your life, or hang out for some accountability and encouragement? It all starts there. Start with an invite. When you get together, it's time to ask some questions and gather information. You need to figure out what stage the person is at, right? And we just talked about this with the next steps. It all starts with identifying the stage of discipleship that they're currently at and figuring out what that next step is in their life. This is going to give you the milestone that you can work towards, okay? Fourth tip is this: cast a vision. Once you've figured out their stage and once you've figured out their next step, if you know that you're meeting with someone and their next step is to partner with the church, you can say, hey, listen, what I think would be great with our time together is if I could help you connect with the church, because I believe that the church is just so valuable in a person's life. And we've got some really cool tools at CCW to help you do that. And I want to help. I want to be there for you. I want to be a part of that process. Cast the vision in their life about what that looks like. If you're moving them towards leadership, tell them what you see in their life. We call this I see in you conversation. I see in you the ability to lead others. I see in you a passion for Christ. I see in you the capability of going further and leading a ministry. I see in you. Cast I see in you conversations. Talk to other people about this stuff. Explain the next step. And then once you've done that, plan to meet. If they're willing to, say, hey, let's get together, maybe every other week, maybe it's once a month, maybe it's every other week, depending on the circumstance. Let's get together. And by the time we're next together, and this is number 6, you're going to set the challenge. By the time we're next together, this is what you need to do, or this is what we're going to do. Or by the time we get next together, read through this book of the Bible, or accomplish this next step, or all kinds of things that you can do to set a challenge. This is part of understanding whether someone is actually faithful, available, and trainable, because a lot of times what happens is you set that challenge and you get back together, and this is how accountability worked like in my life for such a long time, is we would get together and we would go, hey, how'd you do? And not so great, man, do better next time, and then next time, guess what happened? the same exact thing, and the next time the same exact thing. When someone isn't stepping up to the challenge and actually growing and actually taking the steps that they need to grow in Christ, well, maybe you did get connected to the wrong person. And that leads to my next and final tip when it comes to disciple making is know when to quit. Know when to quit. Two things happen to discipleship relationships too often. First of all, sometimes, as we said in the previous illustration, sometimes you get connected to someone who's just, they're not doing anything to grow themselves. And when that happens, you just end up wasting your time and their time when you could be investing in somebody else. The other thing that may potentially happen is that they do take that step, and then you don't know where to go from there. And eventually, even though that was a good discipleship relationship initially, eventually that relationship, it'll stagnate. So know when to quit. Once you've accomplished that challenge, say, hey, I can help you take that next step, or we can set a new goal, or hey, maybe it's time for somebody else to pour into your life. And what I'd encourage you to do is make sure they actually get connected to another disciple maker who is going to invest in their life. With a little intentionality, you'll be able to intentionally disciple others in no time at all. So here's your challenge before you move on to the next session. There's an exercise in the back of your booklet on page 46 called the next step chart. And what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and turn to that page. Let me grab it real quick, show it to you. It looks like this. There's 2 pages of this. And what you're going to do on the next step chart is you're going to write down the name of the person that you're working with and a stage of discipleship that they're at. And then you're going to figure out what their next step is and set a goal for that person. Now, this right here, this is just practice. So even if you're not currently meeting with someone, use your discipleship group or your care group or some people that are in your hemisphere, maybe your family, and write their names down. The goal of this is just to practice developing this habit of recognizing, of identifying the stage that people are at, and then helping them figure out what their next step is. After that, move on to the next session and the last session, where we're going to be talking about leading in environments.